So in this video, I want to talk about how to be a ridiculously productive producer. Now, most producers have no clue what they're doing when it comes to optimizing their workflow and productivity. It's true. They think that they just need to work. They think that they just need to work harder, or they just need to put more hours in. They think that it's just about drinking some coffee and getting to work. But productivity is not just about the hours. It's not just about the amount of time you put in. It's more than that. And we need to dive into this because it's super important. If you don't get this piece of the puzzle right, all the work you've done up to this point will be limited by your lack of ability to execute and be productive. So my goal with this video is to give you the foundation for becoming an ultra productive producer. And if you watch this and apply the tactics, you will put yourself ahead of most producers who either don't know about this stuff or don't care about it and think that they're above it. So what we're going to cover in this video is, first of all, the definition of productivity. What is true productivity? Then we're going to look at the 4 drivers of insane productivity. Then optimizing your life and environment for ultra productivity, and deep work, the one metric you should care about and how to track that. So let's start by redefining productivity. We really need to define what this is because there's a lot of definitions out there of what productivity is. There's a lot of opinions, but it can get confusing. So many years ago, I had a job working on a farm during the school holidays. I spent most of my time outside in the sun. I was working hard. I was getting tangible results, right? Every now and again, though, especially on like a rainy day, it was my job to put little labels on pot plants like these. Maybe it was herbs that we were selling, something like that. And so one day I had a bunch of these plants to label, to stick labels into. And I got going, and after about 1.5 hours of working, I stopped. I'd labeled a bunch of these little pot plants. Now, if you were watching me and you didn't know any better, you would think that I was quite productive that morning. I worked fast, got it done. And that's what I thought as well, until I realized that I'd labeled them all wrong. Now, was I productive? That's the question. The answer is no, I was not. I didn't make any progress towards the desired result of my employer. On a high level, there was no real output during those 1.5 hours because I'd have to redo it. I made a mistake. Now, I say this because a lot of people trick themselves into thinking that they're productive, but they confuse busyness with productivity. So it might be that you as a producer, you're opening up your DAW, you're playing around for an hour, but you're avoiding the hard work that you know you need to do, and then you're calling it a day. Sure, you were working and being busy, and there might have been some level of output, but it wasn't the output that you wanted or needed, and so you can't really say that you were productive. So productivity is not just output, it's the right kind of output. We know that busyness is not productivity. We all know someone who talks a big game, says they work a lot of hours, but has nothing to show for it. And that's busyness. Productivity is better defined, in my opinion, as the rate of progress towards one's goal. So if you think back to the last time you felt productive, chances are you had a goal. Maybe it was to write an essay in 2 days or produce a track in 1 week. When you achieved it, you felt like you'd been productive. You worked hard, but more importantly, you achieved what you set out to achieve and you have a tangible result. So productivity is how quickly and accurately we're working towards our goals. And in the first video of last week's module, we look at the foundations of artist success being vision, goals, and a system. And the system is your daily productivity goal, right? If you don't execute on that, chances are you're not being productive. Now, there is a caveat to this. You don't have to be productive every single time you open your door. In fact, it's probably not a good idea. If you're hyper committed to always working on your system, every time you sit down to make music, you risk killing the spontaneous nature of creativity. And I've made a typo there. It should say your aim shouldn't always be productivity, not should. And so you still want sessions where there's no pressure, where you can just experiment and play. You need that. It's important. It just shouldn't be your MO. I like to spend a couple of hours a week doing this kind of undirected experimentation, but most of my time is working towards my goals. So we now know what it looks like to be productive as a producer, but what contributes to productivity and how can we actually be more productive? Let's have a look at the 4 drivers of insane productivity. You'll also notice that this is a guy from Limitless. It's a great movie. If you haven't watched it, check it out. But I've used that because obviously, the movie Limitless is about this guy who takes a smart drug and is insanely productive. Now, I'm not recommending that you take a smart drug. I'm going to recommend 4 other things instead. So the 4 drivers of productivity are goals, having an objective and plan, state, energy level, and general well-being, the environment that you're working in, and then flow and deep work, which is the productivity muscle. So let's have a look at these. Goals, right? If we take the definition of productivity as rate of progress towards one's goal, then we need to have a goal in order to measure our productivity. And goals increase productivity because they encourage us to do the work in order to achieve the result we want. But if these goals aren't broken down into measurable systems, we can quickly get demotivated. Perhaps the biggest contributor to productivity is one's state and energy levels. And it's hard to be productive if you're exhausted. So state is how you're feeling, it's your health, your energy levels, your general demeanor. And this might include the amount of sleep you're getting, what you're eating, your personal or work stress, fatigue, and so forth. Super important if you want to be productive. And we'll look at this in the next section, but we can't ignore this, even if we want to. It's not directly related to music production, but the more you can optimize your state, the more productive you'll be in the studio. Now, with environment, you can be productive in a poor environment, right? But it's not ideal. So optimizing your environment might look like buying a new chair or desk, getting new lighting, cleaning your space, etc. It might look like renting an external studio or just cleaning the room where you produce. It might be keeping your screen clean, your files and folders organized, and placing a plant or something on your desk. You want to work in an enjoyable environment, a relaxing environment, not one that leads to unnecessary stress. Finally, we have the superpower. And if you've been following me for any length of time, you'll know that I am a huge advocate of doing deep work. If you can get into flow and do deep work, then you are at peak productivity. This is the holy grail of effective work, and it is difficult, but it is well worth the effort. So we're going to look at deep work near the end of the video. So let's talk about optimizing your life and environment for ultra productivity. And as I've already mentioned at various points during this course, if you just want to produce it as a hobby and you're not too concerned with rapid improvement or progress, then a lot of this stuff is overkill. But I doubt that's you, because you've made it this far in the course and you're up to the 3rd week. And we've gone through some pretty detailed mindset stuff, and a lot of it has been a bit dry, so you probably would have quit the course before now. So I'm going to trust at this point that you're committed to developing as an artist as fast as you can. Not necessarily that you want to build a career in this, but you want to be the best producer possible. And you want to develop the mindset and framework necessary to get you there. And so in this section, I want to go over something that the majority of producers do not pay attention to. Honestly, I'm confident that if you implement this stuff, you will be ahead of 95% of producers who either don't care about it or don't think it's important. And thus far in the program, we've talked about how to optimize your mindset and the way you approach production, creativity, workflow, and that's one side of it, and it's important. But you also need to optimize your life and habits outside the production environment if you want to be as effective as possible. I'm not going to delve too deeply into each area of optimization for two reasons. This isn't the course for that, and I'm not an expert in these areas, but I do know where the big wins are. That's what I'm going to talk about. So in terms of life optimizations, sleep. For some reason, producers really struggle with sleep. I think it's probably due to the late nights. A lot of producers are DJs, so obviously you can't really avoid being out late at night. But it's also just not seen as that important. So sleep is the force multiplier. You want to track it, you want to optimize it, you want to reap the benefits. It does wonders for your creativity. Now, I use an Aura, it's called an Aura ring to track my sleep, but smart watches work just fine. Highly recommend doing that, and just try not to produce just before bed if you can help it. The blue light disrupts and delays melatonin production, which can affect your ability to get to sleep. Now, I say this because I've seen producers who stay up really late drinking, sugary Red Bulls and then wonder why they can't finish any music or be creative. It's because they're tired. They're ruining their body and ability to concentrate. It's not something to boast about when you get 2 hours of sleep. It's like you're a ticking time bomb. And every time I've decided I'm going to stay up late and work on music, the next day, I'm just not at 100%. And it really affects my creativity the next day. Second thing is to eat well. And you have to find what works for you. I personally eat pretty low carbs, high fat and protein. Eat for energy and well-being, and you'll be able to focus and concentrate for longer in the studio. Third, drink coffee strategically. If you drink coffee, if you are a coffee drinker, and not everyone watching this will be, don't just slam back all the coffees. Like I normally have one coffee when I sit down to start a session. If I'm producing in the morning, I'll wait like an hour before I produce, and I won't have a coffee in that hour, because when you wake up, your cortisol level is actually quite high, so you have a natural energy boost. If you have coffee as soon as you wake up, you're not really doing much extra. You want to have a coffee when your natural cortisol boost starts to decrease, and then you keep the energy up. Get up and move, like ideally outside and ideally in the sun. You go for a walk around the block. It's not going to fix your resistance, as I talked about, but it will help, will make you feel better, and you can get back into the studio feeling refreshed. And finally, work to a schedule. If you produce well in the morning, then continue to do that. And if you're more of an evening person, do that. Just find what works and stick to it. So what about environment optimizations? Well, the first thing I would say is don't skimp when it comes to your workspace. If you're sitting down to make music for a few hours every day, you want it to be a relaxing and productive environment. And that means buying a decent chair. You could also try a standing desk as well, but don't buy the cheapest chair you can get. I mean, it's going to hurt your back, and hospital bills are bigger than a decent chair. Use lighting that helps you be more productive. I use Philips Hue lights, and I normally have them on like a brighter white color, especially in the morning. At night, I'll dim them so I can get to sleep easier afterwards. Keep your workspace clean, unless you're one of those few people who really do work better in a cluttered environment. Reduce external distractions. If you live with other people, figure this one out, because there's nothing worse than sitting down, being in flow. Maybe you're 40 minutes into a session and someone opens your door to ask you a stupid question or show you something on Facebook. I mean, that's the worst thing. because it takes you a long time to get back into the zone. What I normally do is put just a piece of paper on the outside of my door, just to let my wife know that I'm focused. And if it's urgent, then, she can interrupt. But if it's not, then it can wait. Consider an external studio if you're really serious about this. If you know other producers in your town, maybe you could split the bill. But a lot of people say this is the thing that changed the game for them. Just having a place where they can go that's outside their house just to make music, and you create that physical and mental separation. But if you can't do that, you could try using a different user account on your computer for just production so that you don't get distracted by other things. Okay, so deep work. This is one of the most important things that you need to learn about and do. So true productivity is deep work. It's long periods of focused, concentrated work, right? It's not half making music and half checking social media. It's being laser focused. And the guy who came up with this term, deep work, his name's Cal Newport. And he wrote the book called Deep Work. Here's a quote. Deep work is the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task. Shallow work is non-cognitively demanding, logistical style work, often performed while distracted. Deep work is like a superpower in our increasingly competitive 21st century economy. So let's have a look at some examples of shallow work and deep work. Deep work would be something like writing an essay, or cooking a new recipe, or learning an instrument, software development, research and study. These are all cognitively demanding things, and they require long periods of extended focus. Shallow work might be checking and responding to emails or social media messages, basic data entry, cleaning up your desktop, or having an informal meeting. These aren't cognitively demanding. They're more logistical in nature, and they're easy to do while distracted. Now, not all of production is deep work, but most of it is. So looking at these examples, we know that some types of work are deep and others are not. But what about when it comes to music production? Well, you'll want to engage in deep work most of the time. Writing melodies and chords, arranging your song, mixing, designing sounds. These are all activities that benefit from focused work. But there are other parts of production that can't necessarily be categorized as deep work, such as organizing your sample folders, coloring and naming tracks, or like cleaning up your project, or just making minor tweaks that don't require much thinking. But that's not much. And so most of music production is a deep work centric activity, and it requires a high level of focus and concentration if you want to do it well. So I want to make the argument that deep work is one of the most important things you can focus on as a producer, mainly because it will give you a better return on your time investment than any other strategy. So we know that music production is a creative activity, right? It's not simply about one-to-one inputs and outputs like assembly line work. So if you think of assembly line work, like working in a factory, there's a certain amount of output, like there's a maximum to the output that you can do. It's how fast the conveyor belt goes, or how fast you can move your hands. But you're not going to be able to go any faster than that. That's the rate of return, one-to-one. But with music production, the quality of our output isn't directly linked to the time we spend on it. There's obviously a correlation. You can make a better song in 10 hours than you can in 10 minutes. But it's not a direct link. We can spend 5 hours on something and conclude that it sounds horrible. And then a week later, we can spend 30 minutes on a song and it sounds better than we did when we spent 5 hours on one. So if we want to raise the quality of our output, we should optimize for creativity, not just the amount of time we put in. I know producers who spend 3 to 4 hours a day making music, and they do better than the other producers who spend 12 hours of non-focused work, and they're just wasting their time. So we can optimize for creativity through deep work because deep work is exponential in nature. When you're in a highly focused state, also known as flow, or you're in the zone, you can make more progress in 3 hours than you can in a non-focused state over several more hours. And if you're a software developer or you know a developer, you'll know that this is true. You have periods where you just make an immense amount of progress in like half a day. And it's because of the nature of the work. You're solving complex problems. It's not just assembly line work. And so if you want to be the most productive, creative producer possible, then you want to focus on deep work. You want your production sessions to be enjoyable, but without distraction. And you want an objective. You want to get in the zone as deeply as you can and as often as you can. Of course, this is not going to be easy if you're not used to doing deep work. So deep work is like a muscle and you need to build it through progressive overload. We talked about this in the Fighting the Resistance video. After reading Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, many years ago, I told everyone about the concept, and almost everyone I talked to understood the concept and got the logic, but struggled to implement it, including myself. And that's because it's like a muscle. You need to develop your ability to focus the same way you develop muscle growth. So if you're used to producing in 30-minute blocks without focusing intensely, like you just produce for 30 minutes at a time, you're checking your phone, you're filling your time with distractions, well, you can't just decide that you're going to sit down tomorrow and produce for 4 hours straight in deep work mode. Like, that's just not going to happen. That's like not doing any form of exercise for months and then deciding that you're going to run 10 miles one day just for the hell of it. Like, chances are you'll get a few miles in and you'll give up because your body just isn't adjusted for it. And so we need to build up our deep work muscle in order to get the best results. And Cal Newport claims in his book that most people can't do 4 hours of deep work a day, which you might want to push back on that and say, oh, it's just 4 hours. Of course I can. But he says that's really the max. Like, you won't come across many people who can focus on a task with intensity for more than 4 hours a day. And, you might say, oh, well, I can produce for 8 hours in a day. Chances are you're not doing deep work, at least not the whole time. It's just very hard for humans to focus for that length of time. And so given that most of us aren't conditioned to do this intense, focused type of work for long periods at a time, we need to build it up. And again, I mentioned that we covered this in video 2 of last week, where we looked at how to fight the resistance. I talked about finding your focus baseline and then improving on that. And that's exactly the exercise I recommend doing. But I've got something to help you with this, and that is the deep work tracking spreadsheet, which you'll have a link to. So this is simply just a Google sheet. And what you'll want to do is copy this out, click duplicate, and make your own month. So I've got January here, and you can come in and change the date. And you want to find your baseline. First of all, we talked about that in video 2 of last week. And once you've got your baseline, you're going to have your session increase by a certain amount. I've got 5 minutes here. And so this is your goal, your target. We can call this target. And this is what actually happens. So let's say on the 1st of January, your target is 30 minutes and you do 35. Great. Next session, you're going to aim for 35. And maybe you do 35. Cool. And so on and so on and so on. Even if you go over, like even if you hit 45, doesn't mean that you go up to 50 here. You want to make it easy on yourself and just increase by 5 minutes each time. Again, this is a minimum. So, you're not, if you hit 30 and you want to keep going, then keep going. But this is your target. This is what you want to hit. And you can see if your baseline is 30 and you do this every day for a month, you will get to 3 hours consistently. Now, the key here is to focus on consistency because you will likely skip some days. You'll find it hard to focus on other days and you'll fall off the wagon occasionally. That's fine as long as you get back up and keep building your deep work muscle. And once you get to the point where you can focus for 3 to 4 hours consistently, if you have that kind of time available, if not, you can still get a lot done in 1 to 2 hours, then don't stop. Like, don't relent. Keep it up because you're ahead of the game at this point. Most people cannot do that. So, action items. Make sure to fill out the worksheet, and then if you can, make some immediate fixes to your environment and think about fixes you can make to your lifestyle if you can optimize that side of things. Then make a copy of the deep work tracker and start filling it in with each production session, focusing on that incremental progressive overload.